Margo is the former president and CEO of Ancestry.com and served on the company's board of directors. Prior to that, Margo served as the CEO of Mattel. I'm sure when you were younger, you all knew the Mattel name, a leader in play, learning, and development. She previously was president of Americas at Google. She was a vice president, and she was also served as a COO of Groupon, executive vice president of U.S. Card Services, and CMO of Discover Financial Services. She was a partner at McKinsey in London and Chicago. She's a champion of organization that inspires girls to pursue educations and careers in STEM and advancing the generation of women leaders. I think we'll talk a little bit about that today. She earned a BA in economics and an MBA from Harvard, and we're thrilled that she would be here with us today. Margo has been very generous with her time to be with us today, but also in the preceding weeks, as she and I talked about questions that might be most interesting to you. Some of you students gave me feedback on questions to ask her, and we're going to go through those. But Margo, I'll let you make a little bit more introduction, a lead in, and then I'll start asking you some questions, if I may.
As a mother of 3 students who are in your same age group, or maybe a little bit older, I really have a strong passion for connecting with the future of the people that are going to inspire and change the next generation. So it's just a real pleasure to be here, and hopefully we can cover lots of topics that are meaningful to all of you.
Margo, with that introduction, I think I'm going to start with one of the very first questions that we have reviewed, and that is, you seem to be able to handle balancing a vibrant career and raising 3 successful children. What are your secrets? How did you do that? What advice would you give to these students who are a few years behind you and me?
Well, thank you. I'm fortunate enough to be married for over 30 years, amazing partnership, and we got married really young and we had kids when we were young, and so our kids were always an active part of our lives, both personally and obviously in balancing that with work. I think that the biggest thing I always learned is you can have it all, but you can't always have it all at once. And so I think, what's really helped us is that we're really a team, and we agreed early on in our marriage what was most important to each of us and how we could support each other to accomplish that. For me personally, that I was putting my family first. And what enabled me to have a vibrant career and travel and do things I needed to do was we made the choice to raise our children near our family, which I'm sure a lot of people in this audience can relate to. My parents lived 5 blocks away from us. My grandmother actually lived with us for over 10 years when my children were young. And so I always felt that I had that incredible support system. And if you have that opportunity, I highly recommend it. As a woman, I think it really makes it much easier. In addition, I think we all find great opportunities in compromise. I think a lot of times we think about barriers versus opportunities. And I found as a woman, sometimes the choices I made, for example, when I was a partner at McKinsey, a lot of my colleagues were traveling all over the place. But for me, I made a commitment that I wanted to be able to get to most of my clients within an hour's drive. And so when I negotiated that where we lived, that enabled me to push my boundaries, and I worked in a lot more industries than I probably would have otherwise. And through that, built tremendous pattern recognition, so I found opportunity in staying within my values. Or when I took my first line job, now probably in hindsight, if I'd gone to Google in 2004, maybe that would have been a better choice at some level. But personally, the fact that my first big line job was 15 minutes from the house, so that I was able to both transform a company and take it public, but also be able to have breakfast and dinner with my kids, was a big important choice. And then I did go to Google in 2009 when my kids were older, and that was something that really worked for both my husband and my career. And so I've always found that out of compromise can come really great new learning. And so if you look at it that way instead of as a barrier, I think it's amazing what you can accomplish.
Thank you very much, Margo. Do we have a volume issue?
Yeah, you're muted. I'll be up here.
Okay. Can you hear me now, Margo?
I can.
Okay. By the way, my 3 sons all started in consulting, and so I know a little bit about that world. How did you know when to move from one step to another? I think my sons wondered that. I wondered that in my career. And so, I mean, when we replay our career, it looks like all the dots connected perfectly. But my guess is at times you wondered about that. Could you expand on that a little bit?
I can. I think if I think about my career, from the very beginning, I've just been incredibly mission driven about how technology and data democratize access and can drive transformational experiences and returns. I started out as an agricultural economist, and I waited around in a paddy field 5 miles from the nearest dirt road. Hard to connect that to actually what I do today, but actually underpinning that is something very simple. It's an obsession about ecosystems, data and technology, and how when you put those things together, these complex systems, you can make better decisions, you can create much more superior and smart experiences. And what enabled over time in my career was technology enabled that to happen, right? Increasingly quickly at scale. And so when I think about it, it was really always about building platforms with increasing returns to scale, whether it was helping to make the decisions that made an economy, micro and macro, run smarter, or was using data to help different kinds of companies, right? When I was a partner at McKinsey, right, be smarter, or then building platforms at Discover, right, and Google, and Ancestry. And so for me, I think it's really finding that passion. For me, that's always been at the center of what drives me. What then also I think is really important when you think about your career is there's a great saying I love from the founder of McDonald's, Ray Kroc. When you're green, you grow. When you're red, you rot. Or you're ripe, you rot. And really what that says is whenever you start feeling too comfortable in what you're doing, right? I've aced that, I really understand everything about it. Well, that's the time that you actually know that you need to step out of your comfort zone and go do something else to really stretch yourself, because you learn the most when you're a little bit uncomfortable, when there's a lot of new things coming at you. And so I think that's part of what enables us. So find that passion and then continue to challenge yourself to take it that one more step, take it to that next level. And so that's really what's guided me. How am I always at the edge of my seat? How am I pushing myself out of my comfort zone?
We've had another speaker, Margo, tell us that you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's
exactly right. Larry Page's favorite saying at Google was, we should always be uncomfortably excited.
Well, I think it's hard for most of our students to imagine that you feel green at anything. And you just left an organization where clearly you made significant inroads and led Ancestry to new heights. Do you feel green today? And if so, what's the secret to staying green?
Yeah, look, I think really successful leaders are incredibly deeply curious and passionate about solving complex problems. And, that's what's always driven me, is to sign up for that next challenge. I think, my mother who was a great inspiration in my life, she always said to me, never just do what people expect for you, do what you're passionate about. And so, as I said before, for me, that's building these transformational ecosystems that can change lives and build amazing businesses. And so, I have a huge passion for the transformation of healthcare. I think we all learned during COVID that we have a healthcare system that's not resilient, right? It's not accessible, it's not affordable, right? It's not the kind of experience that we all expect in today's life. And we've massively disrupted our economy during COVID. But out of this incredible disruption comes incredible opportunity. So one of the reasons I went to Google in 2008, right after the financial crisis, is that was an inflection point where you could see that the software revolution was going to take off. And I wanted to be part of that. This is a moment where I see that with all the disruption from COVID, we will also create the ability to reimagine and transfer and break through boundaries. And this is kind of a once in a generation opportunity, because we've seen these huge shifts to telemedicine when no one actually thought that was actually work for a lot of treatment protocols. We've broken the boundaries in terms of thinking about actually consumers can test themselves at home. And if more healthcare could shift to the edge, to the clinician's office and to the home, and be accessible anytime, anywhere, that could transform how we think about this. And then if we apply technology to create more consumer-centric experiences, so consumers have transparency in price, access experience, and we can actually continuously make that smarter, we can truly transform and move from sick care to what I would call healthy care, right? We want to intervene more upfront and keep people from ever getting sick. And so both at an individual level and a population level, I want to be part of building those next generation ecosystems that are going to do just that. And so that's what I've committed the next 5 to 10 years of my career to be all about.
You sound healthily green. Congratulations. I'm just going to pause and see if I have a whole list of questions, but students, if there's one from you here or online, I'm just going to pause to see if anyone raises a question here or in the chat box. Any in the chat? Okay, I'm going to go on. I think most of us know Ancestry a little bit in this community, in this valley. They've been such an iconic company in Utah. I understand they may be shifting some direction with new ownership. What do you see as the future of Ancestry?
So Ancestry is just an unbelievably phenomenal company. I loved being there. It was like a mission that called me. I think for so many of us, my family came to this country at the founding of the country, and that connection to that history and that sense of collective responsibility to what we've built and still can build as a beacon for the world really anchored me and my sense of identity. And I think that's really important for everyone to have access, to democratize access to that opportunity. And so the work that Ancestry does, 4 out of 5 people want to know more about their family story. They just don't realize that they can actually go and find those stories and those records, and we can make it easier than ever for them to do that. So I think Ancestry will continue to stay relentlessly focused, obviously as an active part of that process in choosing the new partner in Blackstone. They fell in love with Ancestry's global leadership in family history and the ability to keep democratizing that access by bringing in more records, going global, making experiences simpler and easier, and also thinking about what kind of experiences will inspire, particularly younger audiences. And we saw during COVID, where people have more time and they were at home, a dramatic increase in younger people who wanted to go on these journeys. But there's so many additional ways in which we can make those engaging with video, social, mobile, and community experiences that are more in touch across generations, both individually and collectively. So I think that the company will continue, to aggressively look for opportunities to serve that core mission as they look ahead.
As a white male, last name McDonald, I had very few surprises when I sent in my saliva kit to Ancestry. Did you have any surprises when you did that test?
Actually, Georgiadis is a married name, so my maiden name is Hastings. So no, I did not have a lot of surprises in sending it in. But I think there's something magical about the ability to understand who people are that you're related to, not just that you're related to them through your DNA, but what Ancestry enables is to understand who is that shared ancestor 2, 3, 4, 5 generations ago that is the reason that you're connected to them. And I think it gives a new sense to how we think about that fabric and that broader sense of humanity that we're connected to. So for me, I think that was some of the most powerful discovery.
Well, we're going to interrupt this program to recognize our president has raised her hand. Astrid Taminas, President Taminas, is electronically joining us. President, could you ask your question?
Yes, I get asked that question a lot, so I joke about my attention deficit syndrome. It actually relates to a little bit of what Margo said. When I feel mastery and I start getting bored, that's usually a red flag that I've got to go do something else. I think another reason that I've known it's time to go is the people. I think because we spend so much of our working hours at work, we need to be able to respect the people we're with and be inspired and energized. And if I no longer feel that way, I've also left. At the same time, let me issue a caveat. It is important not to jump every year. I've had jobs, including my last one before UVU at Microsoft, where I just thought I made the wrong choice and I was going to fail. I couldn't understand what they were talking about. And I still was so determined to give it 6 months, and I stayed 6 years. and it was incredible.
So I think the question I had gotten was about universities and the role that they can play in democratizing access. And, clearly, universities are such an important convening power where in this day and age, we can truly bring together a broad set of conversations. You talked about the challenge that we have in the country where we can often feel very divided when we're so much better as a collective, when we can have an open dialogue and find ways to listen and hear each other. And I can't think of a more important role for a university than to ensure that we have an open and balanced dialogue and everyone feels that their points are valid and that we can try to find a more constructive and collective dialogue. And I think that's a critical role of a university. In addition, I think the world is being reimagined with technology. As I shared, I've had a lifelong passion for encouraging people to pursue STEM education, obviously, particularly women, because we want to make sure that everybody is reflected in the reimagination of those services. And so if we don't have inclusivity in the design, we're not going to make those as effective as we possibly can. And so I think universities have a real responsibility to ensure that they are bringing those opportunities to the forefront and ensuring that if we need to make up gaps, perhaps in the math and science education that was achieved in high school, that would provide people simple and easy on-ramps so they can feel a sense of success. Because so much of the career opportunities will be connected to STEM opportunities as we look forward. And not all, but I think they will be disproportionately some of the most important growth areas. So those are just a few ideas for how I think universities can play an important role, both in their role as a convener in great conversations, as you have this open enrollment, so we're being as inclusive as possible, but also we're ensuring that the connection to the types of reimagination and transformation that are going on, that universities can be an accelerant of those opportunities. I guess the last piece is I think universities can play a really important part in helping every student get started in their career and find their passion and a place to get started. And so that connection between the investment in education, to finding that right career, I think is also really important. I happen to be on the board of a company called Handshake, which you may utilize at the university.
We are users of Handshake.
Yeah, and I think that's a great opportunity to help democratize access to opportunity, both internships and full-time opportunities, by enabling your students, no matter where they're from, who they know, or what their interests are, to be connected to opportunities wherever they want to pursue them and with a wide variety of companies, because it really makes it much easier for everyone to gain access and connect. And so I think there's a lot of new things that we can do to really think about that development collectively.
Margo, thank you. I'm just going to give a little advertisement for Handshake. If you are not signed in on Handshake, you need to do that immediately. It's the way most employers will be reaching out to you to find your availability, both as Margo talked about for internships, but for employment as you leave the university. So the Woodbury School of Business has the highest percentage of our students who are signed up for Handshake than any other college at the university, but it's not 100%, so please sign up for that. President, if you're done, I'm going to ask another question of Margo. I don't want to interrupt you if you had a carry-on thought.
I appreciate your response, Margo. I think one thing that I would add is I think the fact that at UVU, a certification as an associate degree, bachelor's, master's, this menu I think is also really important, and I hope that the employers and the industry appreciate that we can offer everything from a certificate of proficiency all the way to a master's in cybersecurity, let's say. And I appreciate your point also about being an accelerant. I see that universities like UVU in particular, as a teaching rather than a research institution, we can be a very strong partner in being, I think, that what I call the workhorse for the workforce of not only the state of Utah, but Utah and beyond. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I completely agree with you that the shifting opportunity to think about a whole range of different kinds of degree programs and how that can be connected to great success and really thinking differently about that. So I do think that's a very important opportunity. And I think these kinds of the connection between platforms such as Handshake and the employment and making that more efficient also enable those degree programs to happen, and also to demonstrate that they lead to great outcomes. Because I think that's the things we need to do to shift perceptions of different pathways. There's not one pathway, there's multiple pathways. And I think places like universities like UVU do a wonderful job of helping people discover different ways to get to the opportunities that they're seeking.
Yeah, thank you.
Margo, another question you and I talked about. Many students, as they sit here in the early part of their career, are seeing the degree of success that you've had and a fairly constant chain of that. Have you had a big failure? And if so, how did you overcome it? What did you learn from it?
So I think, what's really important is that almost every successful leader, I can't think of any that I know, I think you learn the most from your failures. And I had plenty of them, along the way. And in fact, I kind of have a principle when I'm interviewing with different executives. If people cannot openly admit that they've ever actually had a failure, that actually demonstrates that they're actually not learning enough. Because it's in those moments where you're the most tested that you expand. And if you actually look at those of you who want to be entrepreneurs, many investors actually prefer to invest in a second-time entrepreneur who actually failed the first time, because you learn so much about how you think about your idea and product market fit and managing your cash burn and all these different concepts that sometimes can be foreign. I think probably one of the most seminal failures, early in my career, I had been a partner at McKinsey, and this really shaped me a lot because I was very, very close to the CEO. I'd done a ton of work for the company, and it was at the time that the internet was just beginning to take off, in the late 90s, and everybody was chasing the dream of the potential of e-commerce, and they hadn't really developed much capability internally, and so this company really wanted to make a big acquisition in the space to kind of jumpstart their potential. But as I looked at the different companies that they wanted to pursue, the one that they started to zero in on really was one that I did not believe was going to be successful. And I really tried to convince them. But what I realized is people fall in love with the idea versus the reality of what it really takes to be successful. And there's so many acquisitions that fail. But the most important lesson for me, and I ended up having, after they bought it and it failed, having cleaned it up, I really learned, a lot about, as a leader, it's great to see the future, but you always have to balance that with the pragmatism of being able to capitalize on whatever decision you make. And it's very easy to underestimate the risks and the skills and to chase the shiny new object. And I think it really helped me as a leader as I moved into my online career. I always keep in mind, whenever I'm thinking about a big, bold move for the company or an acquisition, it's really important to take risks and see those new opportunities. But you also need to be grounded in at least 2 or 3 very practical and tangible reasons why you believe that you can be wildly successful in that new direction, versus just being obsessed about the direction. And so I think that's always kept me balanced, both in that strategic ambition, but also, the tyranny of execution.
Margo, you and I, as we discuss questions, this is a question that I hope in 20 years is not asked, but I think it's appropriate now. Did you ever feel disadvantaged as a woman in the workforce, and what did you do to overcome that, to be noticed and succeed?
It's a question I get a lot, and I must admit, maybe because my mother was such a trailblazer, she was the only working woman in our town when I was growing up. And she had been a housewife who did social service work. She was a music major who taught music is music therapy, and she was working in hospitals and other places, and she was bothered by the way the world was working for these patients, and that she felt they were grossly underserved. And so she went back when I was young, and she got a PhD, and then she went into the medical field. She ended up writing all the legislation in our state to fix this problem, and then she went and worked in 3 presidential administrations. So I think I grew up in a household where I saw no boundaries, that I had a mother who could start out as a housewife and end up as a national policymaker. And so for me, I always focused on what she taught me, which is don't focus on that sense of identity. Follow great people that are boundary pushers that will stretch you and help you create opportunities. Think about your passions, because when you're passionate about something, you will run through walls like my mom did, trying to solve that problem, because that's what will drive you, and it makes it easier to look past those barriers. Yes, was she paid a fraction of what the men were paid at the same? Yes. Did people, right, sometimes not listen to her? Yes. But she always taught me that if you care enough about the change that you're making, you're able to push through, right, those uncomfortable situations. And I definitely personally believe that as well, because I was driven by the impact that I wanted to be part of versus maybe the identities or expectations other people had for me. I also think, what really helped me is I decided early on what mattered most to me, as I talked about earlier, and I set some real boundaries around personal and professional. So I would live a life without regrets, right? I didn't want to be a really successful woman leader whose kids didn't actually really have a relationship with me that was deeply personal. And I didn't want to miss their special moments as they were growing up. I wanted to be a room mom. I wanted to do all those things that we all had passion for. Maybe I couldn't do as many as others that may have had a less demanding career, but I decided those things that were most important to me and to my children, so that they always felt that I was very prominent in their lives. And so I think because I was able to kind of make choices that kept those things in balance while pursuing my passions to make a difference and make an impact. I think that's what's enabled me to be successful.
You've identified something I've long believed, and that is it's better to inherit a belief in yourself than inherit wealth. And it sounds like your mother gave you that, and I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
What do you see makes successful colleagues, either as employers, employees, or your peers? What do you think makes them successful, and how do you find those traits, develop those traits?
So when I think about successful colleagues, and it really doesn't matter whether it's someone who just started or someone who's more advanced in their career, the three threads, like my golden threads I believe in is, people that are deeply curious. They're fundamentally continuous learners. They see possibilities. They have a growth mindset. And those kind of people really, are the ones that you want to invite to meetings. They're the ones that you want to stop by at the water cooler and chat with. And to really, they help you, right, be better. I think also they're people that are accelerants with others. They collaborate in a way that brings everyone up. Because when they're in the room, there's more energy, right? They're an energy creator. And last, I think people that are really impact and outcomes oriented, right? There's two different ways you can walk in. You can start out by thinking, let me tell you how much work I did and the long list of activities I pursued. There's a different mindset, which is about, is what I'm doing really having impact and outcomes? And are those outcomes the ones that we're all aligned to versus individualistic? And so, again, when you combine those three, those create a phenomenal colleague, someone who's curious, who you always feel like is bringing new ideas into the room, and a personal accelerant, right? When they just make everyone better. And when they actually do that in a way that's creating outcomes for the group, I just think those are the best colleagues consistently.
Thank you very much. Margo, you entitled your talk Leadership Transition. To some employees, that invokes fear, right? Here comes in a new changer, and it's my comfortable world's going to be upset. Mm-hmm. When you've led change successfully in organizations, how have you determined what people you keep, what people it might be time for them to leave, and how you make them successful moving forward?
Well, ultimately, if you think about leadership, in my view, you have to set a really bold and compelling vision for the destination that everybody feels personally part of. And then you have to translate that into an operating plan. And most importantly, you have to have the right people to get it done. And you have to be able to help them galvanize and organize in a structure, right, and a set of focus areas and metrics, right, that create energy. And, if you talk to any CEO, any senior leader, you ask them, what's one thing that you wish you'd done differently? And I think people will always say that I didn't move faster to get the right people in the right place. It's also one of the hardest decisions because I also think great leaders are deeply personal with the people that they work with because they build a sense of trust. You trust their vision, but you also trust them at a personal level, that they have the best interests of the organization and the people, because that's what enables people to take risks and do their best work. And so that's why it can be very hard to make those decisions. At the same time, my view is that you always need to be transparent about where's the company going. Why is change needed to get there? Why might you need to bring in new talent or make changes in the talent you have? What's the why? And I think when you do that, that enables people to embrace change in a positive way. I think equally important is that you treat everyone with the utmost respect, because the company got to where it is today and was successful in doing that because the people that built it. Even if their roles may shift over time, it's very important to be unbelievably respectful of the past while you're getting to the future. And I think there's two options, right? You can either talk about how the past wasn't good enough for the future, or you can talk about how you're building on the strengths of the past to get to the future. And I think abundant thinkers and abundant leaders in their style do that. And I think that's what enables those transitions to happen in a way that everyone can feel positivity out of it.
You referred a little bit to good to great of getting the right people on the right seat on the bus. When it's obvious that I am not the right person on that seat, how do you let someone go with a degree of dignity for them, but also with certainty so you can move forward?
I think it's the conversation I was just having, being transparent about where the company's going, what are the most important skills and capabilities, and being honest with someone about where you think they're fantastic, but where there are gaps that need to be filled in for the company to achieve its ambitions, and then to help that person really understand what they want. In some cases, maybe they're willing to step up and build those capabilities. In other cases, maybe there's another opportunity that really fits who they are and what they're doing. And perhaps, I have, obviously, when I went to Google, it was less than 17 billion, and when I left, it was over 100 billion. So you can imagine that some of the skills that were needed when the company went, over 5x, it was different kinds of skills. People had different kinds of pattern recognition, different abilities to lead at different levels of scale. And so I think it's the responsibility of a leader to always help people understand that pathway and how everyone can grow within it. It just means different roles and different people may need to shift and adjust over time, so everyone can be at their best.
One question and there's a question from the audience?
Yeah.
Go ahead, shout it out loud, and Margo, let me know if you can hear it okay. If you can, I'll repeat it.
Sure. So my question is, as a leader in like technological innovation and things like that, where do you see the most innovation coming from in the technological management hierarchy? Like, is it coming from the engineers? Is it coming from their managers? Is it coming from the supervisors? Or what do you see there?
Well, I believe that the best technology companies in the world are very flat, and great ideas come from everywhere. And part of the reason that I think it's so important to have a purpose-driven organization where everyone understands, right, how what they're doing fits into the whole, so that you're empowering. It used to be in the old days of running a company, the senior people had all the information, and so they had the broader ability to actually see the future and see forward. I think what we're seeing with the distribution of information and much better transparency and data and metrics and organizing organizations in a way that everybody sees what is that North Star metric and how do we all contribute to accelerating it. That transparency and data and insight, if I think back in my career when I started a few decades ago to today, it's flattened that, it's enabled, right, lots of innovation to come from more places. And that's why when people look at some of the most successful companies in the world, what they've really mastered is in enabling that multiplier effect of more people innovating in more areas of the company simultaneously. And so that distributed model, I think, is really the way of the future, and will consistently, especially in the technology space where speed and agility, right, is the master of success. I think that will continue to be the case. We certainly saw that at Ancestry. I did openly roundtables in the front lines all the time, always walked away with some fantastic ideas that would make the company better. And I think that lack of traditional hierarchy in terms of where great ideas come from is very important.
You spent quite a few years at Google, and you no doubt saw some colleagues who, when they had a financial reward, decided they were going to live the rest of their life on the beach, and other colleagues who said, I'm going to start another new company. You seem to form in that latter group. What keeps driving you, and is there beach plans in your future?
No, I don't think I'm a person that's wired to be on the beach. Everyone is different. In my case, maybe because as I shared with you, I grew up in a household where it was about being compelled by a mission, but continuing to take that to the next level and find more and more ways to have impact on it. And I'm all about seeing that opportunity in those platforms of the future and how to accelerate them. And I look at what motivates me isn't about money, right? I think I've been way past that for a long time. It's really about impact and being able to help propel that next wave of innovation. As I said, democratize, make things more accessible, more affordable, and work better for everyone. And so as long as I see ways in which I can leverage my skills to build those kinds of platforms, that's why I'm on the board of Handshake. I want to democratize access to opportunity. That's why I'm on the board of Workboard, which is about translating and creating purpose-driven workplaces where everyone sees themselves, right, in the mission of the company. We can create using technology at horizontal velocity, right, in a company. And so I pick purposely the places that I want to spend my time to enable me to enjoy, right, the impact that's possible on the world. And so that's what drives me. That's why I'm not a beach sitter.
Well, there's lots of ways to find joy, and it's not only on the beach. I noticed that our president is still on. President, did you have another follow-up question?
I actually started eating my lunch.
I'm sorry, President, I should have
great
warned you.
conversation. So I think this has been a really rich conversation. I had not thought of a specific question, but Margo, my friend, Jeanette Bennett spoke so highly of you after she interviewed you. So maybe I'll just follow up again back to the role of a university. How do we get down to the younger women in your career? What have you and your teams done to reach out to middle schoolers, high schoolers, to really encourage the participation, accelerate the understanding of how fun it could be in technology, or have a career and not be afraid to think big and imagine big and be successful? UVU is doing a bit of this, but I'm always looking for more ideas.
Yes, thank you. It's such an important part. When I was at Google, I ran an organization called Women at Google, and we had over 10,000 women all over the world. And what we did actually is go out and both with girls and the parents, really help them understand the importance of STEM education, because what we learned is the parent encouraging, right, the daughter was as important as, right, encouraging. Because so often if a girl were to begin studying math or science and find it difficult, they would say, oh, it's okay, right? You don't need to be good at that.
Yeah.
No, this is really important for your future, right? We're gonna help you work at that. I think also programs that enable girls younger to get involved in math and science and really see the beauty of it. So Made with Code is an amazing program where girls can go and try projects and do things in a group setting, which is very inspiring. And so they see how the world's being rewritten with code. They don't think about it as, they think about it as all connected to all the things they love, and fashion and music and friendships and communities and all these things that make experiences more powerful. Also, I think it's very important. In addition to that, I've been a lifelong member of a group called the Committee of 200, and we go into universities and speak and share. We're a group of both CEOs of entrepreneurial ventures as well as corporate, and sort of really helping her see her to be her, because I think that's very important. Most of us, as I've talked about my own mother, or other women, when you actually see that possibility and you don't see those boundaries, I think it enables you, to feel that sense of motivation and drive, right, to try to achieve that. And I think that's true for, people of color, women, and I think we really have to go out of our way to ensure that we're opening up those doors and providing those opportunities as early as possible.
Do you have any additional observations on this topic when it comes to Utah?
Well, I think it's, really important that we think about, in the university setting and other places, what I would call sponsors as well as mentors. And the difference is important, right? And I know you are super aware of that. I think there's many mentorship programs where you're able to, meet someone and learn about their career choices and really have that role modeling. But a sponsor is someone who's actually actively going to help clear paths to opportunities, to support and recommend you. And that's one of the reasons why my husband and I launched this investment fund. And it's our own money, so we're not running around raising money from other people, but we've had a 20-year track record of helping entrepreneurs successfully, create compelling business plans, launch businesses, and scale businesses. And what we saw in a lot of the research from a lot of the incubators is that women really struggle to have that sponsorship and mentorship network that would help them hone the business plan so that they could then get to those funding levels. The numbers are pretty astonishing in terms of the number of women who actually get not only their seed funding, but get to any significant level of scale-up funding. And there's a whole bunch of reasons behind that. But I think part of that is having that support network, that sponsorship network that enables you, right, to get to that next level.
Thank you.
Margo, I think we have time for just one more question, and it's the one we often ask. You're now talking to a 20-year-old version of yourself, or I guess we could say one of your daughters. What advice do you give them?
Well, I have a daughter and 2 sons.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was 3 girls.
And I love them dearly. And I guess I try in general to ask them great questions to get them to reflect on what's most important to them versus try to give advice. But I think when I do break over that boundary and give advice, the 2 things I always encourage them is to find your passion, whatever you love to do, figure that out. And it may change over time, right? Did I know this whole ecosystem thing? Not exactly. I was really passionate about really helping third world development, and that's what got me into ecosystems. But then all of a sudden I realized these patterns are connected to many other things. And so I kept opening my mind to different ways of thinking. And connected closely to that is finding great people. Because when you work with really great people that are pushing the boundaries of whatever they're doing, it doesn't matter what it is, they're going to inspire you to stretch yourself further. And they're also going to put you in the path of opportunity. Because I personally believe that really successful people, they're not just lucky, they put themselves in the path of opportunity. And I think you do that because you're passionate about what you do, right? So you're pushing yourself and you're doing it wherever possible with people that are at the edge. And that's what actually creates that velocity. And so that would be what I would recommend to my 20-year-old self.
Margo, thank you. From a woman who's clearly put herself in the path of opportunity, she's now encouraged you and I to put ourselves in the path of opportunity. Will you please join me in thanking Margo for speaking to us today?